that when God created us, he limited his power by giving us what you call free will.
Correct.
But it doesn't, in the mind doesn't accept for a creator to have limited power. Can you agree with that?
No.
No. Completely disregarding what Jesus said.
No.
When you honestly believe that the human, the innate thoughts, when it comes to what is a creator, they will come up in their head and say the creator has limited power, the creator has limited knowledge.
That's not what I said. It is possible for an all-powerful God to partially limit his power by creating us free.
But that doesn't mean all powerful.
If you disagree with the definition, fine. I respect your right to disagree with the definition.
Okay, so then we'll take
but what
it
I'm
somewhere
saying
else.
is,
We'll take it somewhere
what
else.
Jesus insisted is, God is all powerful, which means his will shall win in the end. But he's partially limited his power by giving us a free will. That's why if I go up to this gentleman, haul back, and send my fist towards his handsome face, God is not going to automatically put plexiglass in between and I bounce off the plexiglass. He's given me a free will. He's given me a hand. I can give the man money to feed him lunch, or I can roll it into a fist and send it crashing into his handsome face.
Okay.
I can do either, can't you?
Yeah, I can hit him if I choose.
But do you honestly think it's God's will for you to hit him?
Absolutely.
Okay, well that's sort of a crazy statement, but anyways, before we get too far into this video, we're going to see Cliff Knechtle debating this Muslim college student about the ideas of Christianity and especially free will. Trust me, this conversation gets quite interesting, so watch till the end. We're going to listen into their conversation, see what everyone has to say, and I will also be giving you my thoughts and insights as the video goes on. Let's go.
And we had this discussion before. You said you have free will and you can make the choice to hit him or not hit him, but by free will, you're completely disregarding the option of a limited will. And I asked you before, if you have this free will, you can fly like a bird, you can make the sun come from the west, but you don't have this ability.
No,
God
ma'am.
did not will for you
Those are
to have
physical
this ability.
limitations you're talking about. You have switched from free will to the limits of gravity.
Not
You're right,
gravity.
I cannot fly through the air because gravity holds me to the ground and I don't have wings like a bird. And I'm not an airplane or a jet. I'm a human being, I don't
So
have the ability to fly. That says nothing about free will. It says a lot about physical limitations.
Which you don't consider to be created by God? So now you're completely...
Of course I believe that's created by God. Gravity's created by God. I am created by God without wings, therefore I cannot fly.
Okay, so when these physical limitations are created by God, isn't it God's will to not create you with wings and to create this thing you call gravity that keeps you on the ground? It's God's will. That's God willed to create these things.
That's correct.
So God also willed for you to not have the ability to do these things. Correct.
Correct.
Yes, correct. So you, with this free will, are now limited by God's will.
Obviously there are limits.
Obviously, your will is limited by the will of God. Completely disregarding, for you just agreed to that.
No.
You just said it.
No, we were talking about physical limits.
That are created
And then we talked
by
about
the will of
a
God.
will that all of us have that enables us to love or to hate, to do good
Still limited
or to do
by
evil.
the will of God.
Okay, I want to clear something up for anyone who's confused here. I believe that the main problem that is happening here is she's confusing free will with omnipotence. Not omnipotence, which we've probably all heard of before, but omnipotence. For example, she says if you really had a free will, you could just will yourself to grow wings and fly. She says if you really had free will, you could just will that the sun rise in the west and set in the east. But again, this is omnipotence, not free will. Free will means to be able to make decisions, by that meaning mental choices, without any external factors forcing you to make those choices. That's free will. Omnipotence, on the other hand, is being able to make decisions regardless of physical external factors forcing you to make those decisions. Again, omnipotence means having the ability to just will anything to happen, regardless of the fact that gravity exists and it holds you down to the earth, regardless of the fact that human beings don't have wings, regardless of the fact that you do not have control over the sun. As humans, we are limited by physical things, physical forces like gravity, like the fact that we do not have wings, like the fact that we cannot control the sun. But this doesn't mean that we don't have free will, it just means that we're not omnipotent. It is physically impossible for us to do things that are physical impossibilities. Now, what is something that is not physically impossible? Well, let's say for example, I had a box of Fruity Pebbles in my right hand and Cocoa Pebbles in my left hand, and I'm trying to make the decision whether to have Fruity Pebbles for breakfast or whether to have Cocoa Pebbles for breakfast. All it is a choice that's entirely up to me. No one else is going to force me to make the decision. No one else is going to influence my decision. I just have to make the choice myself. This is free will. I could pour Fruity Pebbles in the bowl. I could pour Cocoa Pebbles in the bowl. Heck, I could pour both of them in the bowl. I could actually decide to not even eat cereal at all and go cook eggs for myself. I could decide to not do either of those things and go out to a restaurant to get breakfast. Heck, I could even just skip breakfast altogether. You see how many different decisions and different choices that I have to make that no one's forcing me to make? Nothing's stopping me from doing any of these things or doing none of them. That's free will. I hope that my examples made the concept a little bit easier to understand, cleared some things up, at least a little bit, but anyways, let's continue and see where this conversation goes.
Subject to the will of God.
But God has chosen to give us a precious gift
So,
of a
okay.
rational mind and free will.
Okay,
Now,
so
He holds
when
us responsible for how we use those gifts. If I abuse children, I will have to answer to God on a day of judgment.
Absolutely.
If I murder, I will have to answer to God on a day of judgment. But I am free to be a Mother Teresa II or to be an Adolf Hitler II. I have to choose. I have to make up my life. Guys,
So
you
when
don't have
you
to study
say-
for your next exam.
when you say
You can just
choose-
party. But then you'll flunk. And if you go to your professor and say, "How could you flunk me?" He's going to say, "I'm sorry, you answered incorrectly. You flunked." Part of having a free will means you understand there are consequences to my decisions. And I have to learn to live with the consequences of my decision to party, because then I'll flunk. That's part of growing up and being an adult.
So can we say that God willed for the existence of time?
God created time.
God created time, and He existed before the creation of time.
Correct.
Okay. He is not subject or bound to time.
Correct.
So when you say that God chose to give us free will, you're saying at some point He didn't give us free will, at another point He gave us free will, all occurrences in time that God is not subject to.
That would be just as illogical as if I were to say, because God is eternal, God never created human life initially.
No,
That is
no.
baloney. Just because God is eternal does not
No,
mean
no, no, no.
that we have always existed. Human beings are the creation of God at a point in human history. Scientific evidence is that thousands of years ago, human life began. About 5 billion years ago, the Earth began. About 15 billion years ago, the universe began. 20 billion years ago, did God know that He was going to create us? Yes. But just because God knew that He was going to create us did not mean that we existed.
Absolutely.
We didn't exist until God chose to create us. Similarly, when God chose to create us, He chose to give us a free will because He created us to love Him and to love each other. And in order to love, you've got to be free.
But you're attributing change to God, whereas the change that actually happens when a creation is created is a change in that thing. When you say that He decided to do this, He chose to do this, you're saying that there's a change that happens in the self of God that's subject to time, and we already agreed that God existed before the creation of time, and He's not bound or subject to it.
Okay, I think she's sort of confusing herself a little bit, but I actually think that this makes sense. Okay, a lot of people in the comments are like dogging on this woman, being like, oh, she has no idea what she's saying, nothing makes sense. I actually sort of disagree. I think her thought process is very understandable here. but there is some errors with it, so I'll try my best to clear them up. So her stream of thought seems to be that if God enacts things in space, causes things to occur or happen or be created at certain times in space, then that means that he is subject to the time and subject to the creation that he's making, which of course is not true, but this is actually a very common thought process, so I understand her error. But let me try to put this into perspective. Let's say that I created some computer code, and this computer code allows this computer in front of me to access websites and play games, etc. Now, let's say someone gets on my computer and types in Google on the screen. This doesn't mean that I am inside the computer causing Google to pop up on the screen. Now, let's say that they click off of Google and go on to Solitaire. I'm not inside the computer shutting down Google and dealing the cards of Solitaire on the screen, right? That doesn't make any sense. My point here in this example is that just because I created the computer code does not mean that I am inside the computer. Even though I created the code that the computer uses to work, that doesn't mean that I'm affected by it. I'm just the guy that created the computer code, but I exist outside of the computer and outside of the computer code. It's the exact same thing for God, just replace computer with universe and code with time. God created the universe and he created the time in it, but he exists outside of the universe and he exists outside of time. In the same way that the computer programmer can alter the code if he wants, God can alter the universe and cause certain things to happen inside the universe at certain times. But the computer programmer is not now bound by the new code that he wrote, in the same way that God is not now bound by the time that he created. Now, if that was even too confusing, let me just put it incredibly simply. Just because you create something does not mean that you are now bound to the rules of your creation. If you create a video game, you do not now live your life outside of the game adhering to the rules of the game that you created. It's the same thing with God. God created the universe, but he's not bound by the laws of the universe. It's a very complex topic talking about the way that God operates. It's pretty hard to explain, but I can absolutely understand, how her thought process got to this point, but I hope my examples cleared it up a little bit and made the problems in her thought process a little bit more clear. But anyways, we've only got a couple minutes left, so let's finish this video out.
Okay, according to your belief system, who did God love before God created angels and human beings?
This attribute that you call love, you're going to have to define that, because that's not one of the attributes that comes innate in the human being to the existence of God.
Do you believe that God loves?
I don't know what you mean by love. Will I attribute the word uhibbullah? Absolutely, that's written in the Quran. But this attribute of love, you're going to have to define what that means for me.
To love means to actively wish the well-being of someone else. God actively wishes our well-being, Jesus insisted.
But then
that's why he died on a cross to forgive us and to give us life, because he actively wishes our well-being.
That's your excuse when you use that term, God loves everything. That's your excuse to completely disregard God willing for all evil to happen.
You believe God wills murder. I am convinced God does not will murder. God hates murder.
But will
you believe that God wills an adult to abuse a little child.
Attributes.
I am convinced God hates it when an adult abuses a little child.
Okay, I'll agree with you. God ordered us not to murder and not to hate each other and not to commit adultery and not to abuse children. These are things that we were ordered not to do. But God still willed for people to do those things so that we would know what not to do. God willed.
I disagree. And I think Jesus Christ clearly disagrees.
So then
God does not will that I murder so that these people here can say, now I know that murder's wrong.
So then where...
You are being given a mind by God and a conscience. You do not need to see the murder of a human being in order to know murder is wrong. You do not need to see a woman raped in order to know rape is wrong. Why? Because God has given you a rational mind and a conscience.
Yeah, so I this is a great point made by Cliff, but this is the first time where I've heard her say something where I go, no, that doesn't really make any sense at all. And that was when she said that hate and will are not necessarily different things. I absolutely think they are very different things. Why, in any case would you ever will something to happen that you hate? For example, if you had a kid, would you ever will that your kid got into like a fist fight and got beat up? No, probably not. Why would you not will that to happen? Well, because you would hate for that to happen to your kid. So again, this sort of gets back to her misunderstanding of what free will is. She's basically saying that God created us to do evil so that we would not do evil. Now, if you just think about that for a little bit longer than 3 seconds, you'll understand that that really doesn't make any sense at all. In the Bible, in Genesis chapter 1, God says that everything he created was good, including human beings. Now, in Genesis, God's definition of good is our definition of perfect. When human beings were created, we were created perfect, with no sin. Nothing ever went wrong, nothing was dangerous, no one ever got hurt. I mean, as it says, God gave Adam all of the animals to be his helpers. Now, Adam eventually did say that none of the animals were suitable for, to be his helper, and so then God created the first human woman, which is Eve. But this means that Adam could have chose like a tiger to be his helper, and he would have lived out his life with a tiger as his helper. The tiger wasn't trying to kill him the whole time because everything was good. There was no pain, there was no suffering, there was no evil, no badness, nothing. That all happened after the fall, after we, human beings sinned against God by the hand of Satan. So my point here is that human beings were not created with sin. That was not the intention of God. Now, did he know that human beings would sin? Yes, he knew that we would sin, but he didn't create us with that purpose, right? This is the difference. Knowing that something is going to happen does not mean that that is your purpose, or you are going to do that. Again, going back to the child example, if I have a child, I know that my child is probably going to rebel against me at some point. I'm going to say something that they're not going to like, and they're not going to want to listen to me. I know that's going to happen, but I'm not creating them to rebel against me. Of course, I'm going to try to raise up my child to be, listening to me, to understand me, to know that I am their father, and I am trying to do what's best for them. Now, again, inevitably, they're not going to listen to me with everything that I say, and that's perfectly fine. But that doesn't mean that they are created by me to do that thing. Now, I love Cliff's point where he says God has given you a rational mind and a conscience to know that these things are wrong without ever needing to see them happen, right? Now, studies have actually shown that toddlers, as young as the age of 1, which is basically, to me, like an infant, will actually try to comfort other babies when they are crying. They will walk up to them and stroke their head, and if they see that they're upset, they'll offer them toys and things like that to try to make them more happy. Now, these babies don't need to see why the other baby is crying or why they're upset. They don't. All they do is just identify, hey, you're crying, you're upset. Let me help you. This is because God has created us innately with the want and the need to love other people, to help other people. And babies do this without any knowledge of evil. A baby has no idea what evil is. All they know is, I cry, I feel better when I have toys, I feel better when I get my head rubbed, so you're crying, let me give you toys, let me rub your head, let me make you feel better. So science actually shows that her entire theory of God creating us to do evil, to understand that evil is wrong, is completely untrue. Babies don't understand evil, but they understand that crying is a bad thing, and they want to help. God has given us a mind and a conscience to understand that, yeah, some things are bad. We should not have slaves. We should not murder people. We should not sexually assault women, right? We know all of these things are wrong just because. There's no reason for it. The reason is God created us to not do that because it's evil. So I completely disagree with the thought process that God wills us to do evil, because number one, the Bible doesn't say that, and number two, it goes against all logical thinking. Why would someone create something to do the very thing that they hate? It doesn't make any sense. Now, I think that people were being a little bit too harsh about this woman in the comments. She doesn't seem like she's not intelligent. I think her thought process is okay. It's working in generally the right direction, but she definitely has a lot of little errors, which in philosophy, a small error can completely mess up your entire outcome. But anyways, that's about it for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed. I've given you all of my thoughts, and now I would love to hear yours, so please leave them down below in the comments. And also, if you really did enjoy this video, please consider subscribing so that way you do not miss a single future upload from me. But again, that's it. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you guys in the next one. Peace.